Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for the panel discussion that we have here. A really interesting mix of people talking to us today. The topic for the panel discussion is Cybersecurity 2021, Unpacking the Best Defenses for Healthcare. And joining us today for the panel discussion, we have Richard Harrison, who's the CISO at HealthAlliance New Zealand. We have Matthew Lord, who's the Information Technology Security Manager at the Ministry of Health New Zealand. We have Simon Cowley here, who is the Principal Cybersecurity Officer at Victorian Department of Health. We have Varun Acharya, who is the Head of Cybersecurity, Threat Intelligence and Security Operations from HealthScope. And our panel moderator also, Jeff Whitton, who will be running this discussion. He is the ambassador of the New South Wales Cybersecurity Innovation Node. So, Jeff, over to you to lead this panel discussion.
Thank you, Vishal, and welcome to our panel discussion. Topic of unpacking the best defence for. Joining me, I have a great panel lineup. Welcome to you, Richard, Matt, Simon, and Varun. I've had a wonderful day. So I'm going to do our first question, and Simon, if you don't mind, I'm going to direct this question to you, but I'll ask all the panel members to have some input. And the first question is, what is some good news stories you can share regarding training, tools, initiatives that you have within your organisations to promote security uplift?
Great, thanks for that question, Jeff. There's a great deal I can talk in that regard. I will try to keep it short. In Victoria, in the public health sector, the health sector assurance team within digital health have led a number of initiatives for the cybersecurity maturity uplift across the Victorian public health services, and we've been working on this since about 2016, 2017. And we work with specific working groups across the sector and work collaboratively through an assessment program to identify initiatives where we can help out. So health services in Victoria run and manage their own IT and cybersecurity infrastructure, but there are opportunities where we can work collaboratively and from a state-based level to acquire technologies and solutions on a larger scale. And for good examples of our health sector security operations centre, which is a large project which we're just finally completing. We've also worked collaboratively on endpoint protection solutions, providing an advanced endpoint protection on a large scale for our health services in Victoria, and working collaboratively with our health service colleagues to implement. And training and awareness, we've also had done some work in that area as well, not only with tools, but actually just through the work of our collaborations through our working groups, which meet monthly to as trusted information sharing groups to inform and advise, and also work together to make us all more resilient.
Simon? And Varun, would you, in your space, what do you see? What's your good news?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. Thank you for the question. We've taken a multi-pronged approach at HealthScope. So we've got a rapid program of works that kicked off 6 months ago. The core of our program is really what we call human-centric cybersecurity. So we've done a huge investment and time spent on awareness training, education for our staff at all levels of business. So really reaching out to our exco, reaching out to the people in the hospitals, building individual training programs for them. So not just basically signing them up for security training and here you go. We have people on the ground who work with these, who work in part of the business. But what supports that program is also a huge program of works to actually rapidly uplift our security posture. So we are looking at what are the problems that the health sector, or particularly HealthScope, is going to face in the next year or two. And we build a strategy and a program that addresses those issues of the future. We also recognize that we've got security gaps today that we have to address at a more tactical level, and we have a program for that. And on the side, and in parallel, last but not least, we invest heavily in training our technical security staff. So security operations team, and it has a huge, I guess, investment budget to really make sure they master their toolkit and their trade craft. And in parallel with that as well, we want to make sure that we leverage our existing investment in technology. So all of the security technology we put in place at HealthScope, we get the most out of it. So that's really the collaboration across, industry peers, across vendors, and consultants to come in and show us how they leverage these technologies and tools for best practices.
Thank you, Varun. And Matt, and I'd just like to let everyone know that that we have Richard and Matt are from New Zealand, and Simon, Varun, and myself are within Australia. So what good news stories do you have, Matt?
Well, it's been a week of security for New Zealand, that's for sure. So thank you for the introduction. So, look, my good news story is really kind of premised around something that we're doing here and something that I've done in the past. And look, it's about how do you actually bring security to life. So what I've done in past lives, particularly around programs, is not necessarily picking the best tool or having the best security awareness, but it's how do you actually take all these concepts and bring them to life. So one of the things we did in another agencies is I basically stole a whole glass. We had these office windows, and they were like big glass panes. And what we did is we built a big Kanban board. This whole concept that you have tickets of work and you progress them from kind of start to finish. And we kind of built our whole security program on a bunch of stickies on this wall. It was a wall that we deliberately chose, that window wall, which was the biggest meeting room wall, and it was the one that everyone walked past every day because you had to go walk past to get your coffee. And my whole concept was, and again, these security programs often, when they get funding, take a life of their own. You have a lot of people involved. And so people wonder what happens in those environments. So we deliberately had stand-ups in the middle of the office in front of this Kanban board, and we encourage people to ask us questions. And when we would do our security awareness, right, we would definitely do a play on that so people would know that security awareness was part of our program of work. So that worked really well. So again, how do you bring that whole thing to life? How do you make it more visible? How do you actually kind of, let's say it's $10 million. How do you break it down into what are people getting for it? One of the things I've done in Ministry of Health, again, is, I'm a great believer in simplifying it. So I'm starting to we have these 3 core building blocks, as I call them. One of them is vulnerability management, one of them is our SOC partner, and one of it is about actually utilizing that built security within Azure and AWS and code. And I call these the 3 building blocks. And what I do is I go around my project teams and program teams and I talk about the building blocks, and I basically say it's mandatory. And my analogy is, you would build it when you build a house, you would have foundations. Expect to build a house without foundations. Don't expect to go live on a project without these 3 building blocks. And I think that works really well, right? And again, the technology that we've chosen is pretty ubiquitous, but it's actually how we've gone about it. So I think for me, these are the good news stories, because up until I started talking about building blocks, we used to come at projects with a kind of confusing, you need to do this and you need to do that, and maybe you can go live with 2/3 of the building blocks, but now we've been pretty deliberate and simple in our messaging. Do this is what it is, we've already purchased it, off we go. So I think that's my good news stories.
Thank you, Matt. And you, and what thoughts?
So I think over the last 3 years, we started out by doing a bit of a maturity assessment across our security capabilities, developed a strategy based around that, and put a program of initiatives in place to uplift the maturity of our region. So just for those who don't know, HealthAlliance provides shared managed services, IT services to 4 of the district health boards in New Zealand, the 3 metropolitan Auckland ones and 1 in Northland. So we're covering 4 large organisations, 30,000 plus users, one of the largest infrastructures and highly complex environment. So we put some foundational investments in place around tools and technologies, and certainly training and awareness and culture was part of that. We've just reviewed the strategy, and now we're going very much on sort of what's the business trying to achieve from a clinical perspective and an IT perspective. What are the risks that we face from things like digital acceleration, the rush to the cloud, perhaps before we're really ready, technical debt, which I know might be a topic of conversation a bit later, and other factors. And then what controls can we put in place to manage those risks over time? And it's not just about tools. It's about, for me, it's very much about people and process, right? You can deploy technology, but you've got to make the most of it and to use it properly. So very much focusing on how we develop the capabilities around things like vulnerability management, security operations, and bringing them together into what we're calling a unified threat management capability. From a training and awareness point of view, we started very basically with things like phishing awareness training, and that actually had a huge success. Our click rates went down very, very rapidly. We got people actively reporting things, and certainly within sort of 3 months, that platform had probably paid for itself in terms of avoiding incidents and recovery costs. I think there are simple things you can do on the training and awareness side that don't cost a huge amount of money. So we launched called Cyber Heroes. So every quarter we identify one person from each DHB who's done something positive from a security point of view, either reported a phishing email or reported something suspicious. So we recognize that and get some kind of communications going around all that. We certainly have annual cyber awareness weeks in conjunction with CERT-NZ in New Zealand, and we get behind that. So there's a lot of daily themes that go out to the whole organisation to just raise awareness. And throughout the year, we're just sending bite-sized chunks of information, reminding people about phishing, reminding people about social engineering, and just trying to generally raise awareness. And screensavers, simple things like that, where you've just got simple messages you can get across to people very, very quickly and easily. Those are the kind of, I think, small but quite powerful tools you can use, initiatives you can use to just raise that security awareness and culture.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you all, panelists. Great, what you're doing in your organisations, and a little bit of feedback from myself is that as an ambassador for Cybersecurity New South Wales, my role is to sit with and government agencies and politicians to make them aware of the real cyber threat that we are all facing, and to give them an appreciation of their CISOs, CIOs and technical teams are facing when it comes to the real threat of cybersecurity. And there's no real one single answer, and certainly it's about a whole raft of measures that need to be placed in that educate everybody in the organisation from the board level down to at the keyboard that cybersecurity, the threat is everybody's. We all make up the protection space by learning about what we need to do to protect our organisations. And one introducing into some of our training organisations cybersecurity gamification ranges to train new cybersecurity skills to new and to being experts, skills honed at a level that are keeping pace with what hackers are doing. And certainly when we're speaking to the board directors, and we usually show and demonstrate to them that the threat is real by harvesting credentials from itself just by sending him an email. So thank you all. Certainly it's all about educating, and it's not all about the tools, as a lot of people said. It's about education. So I'll move on to the next topic, and the second question is, with investment in cybersecurity, improved and high-profile cyber attacks gaining attention, what are some strategies that would enable the industry to come together, increase and decrease silos to respond to current security threats? And Varun, would you like to give us some of your that question?
Absolutely, Jeff. Delighted to. I think as individual organizations, we've become really good at collecting data about our individual security posture and risk across organizations. But I think when we start sharing that data within the community, we take that first step towards collaboration, across the industry. I firmly believe that the healthcare companies really need to come together through participations in forums like the JCSC and the ISACs, at least on a monthly level, to share, war stories, to share what they've seen from a threat intelligence perspective and what they're dealing with internally in the organizations. There also needs to be some sort of, recognition and support at the federal and board levels, respectively, to encourage the sort of collaboration and open discussion across organizations. We've seen this previously in the financial sector, where between organizations there's informal visits. So security analyst in healthcare company 1 has a number of security analysts in company 2, and it's just a phone call to say, hey, we've seen this, have you seen that? So breaking down those walls and barriers and actually having almost an informal collaboration mechanism goes a long way in breaking down those communication gaps. I guess the most important point for me here is the attackers are collaborating rapidly. They're sharing data, they're sharing information. As an industry, it's to our detriment if we don't come together, if we don't collaborate effectively, and share that information, so we are better prepared to respond to these threats.
Thank you, Varun. And Richard. I don't think we have Richard anymore. He may have popped off. So,
yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you're there, Richard.
2 o'clock, I'm heading off. Look, I think I'd echo a lot of what we have taken out a membership with Health ISAC, which is a sort of organization that is very much focused on threat intelligence and alerting around incidents and events around the globe, and a community that does and can come together to support incidents and response where needed. So I'd certainly think that from a sector point of view, if you're able to sort of join Health ISAC, then certainly I would recommend that. The other thing is other threat intelligence services out there that would give you sector-based information to keep ahead of the game a little bit in terms of vulnerabilities currently being exploited, tactics and procedures being used that you can take proactive action on. I think events like this, people getting to know each other, people making connections, the informal routes to sharing information. Certainly, there are people around the world that I would share information with to help them in any given situation. I think one of the challenges is perhaps coming together in a way that will enable us not just to take technical information and threat intelligence, but how do you translate that into business speak so that you can actually communicate the threats into the business and make it clear that cyber risk is business risk, it's clinical risk from our point of view, and making sure that people understand what the potential consequences of any given threat might be, so that they can take informed decisions at the right levels, respond to those sorts of things. Certainly within New Zealand, there is a network, I guess, of through the health sector, which Matt acts as a fulcrum for, and provides that communication out from the centre to the sector when there are matters of note. I'm sure he'll comment on that.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Jeff.
And I think that's a good overview. Matt?
Yeah, so as Richard said, one of my roles is to disseminate information to the sector, and there's a couple things that happen in that, and I think this is another way of collaborating and acting as one, right? Is sharing of threat intelligence, because clearly a government agency will get party to stuff that needs to be disseminated. But the other thing is we have a health security standard in New Zealand, and one of my biggest bugbears, and I think this is again over and above just sharing information, working together, learning from each other, but we ought to stop buying stuff that's not secure. So if we step outside of security tools, right, and I look at some of the health systems, Richard and I share, I think, a common view on some of these things, and but our business leaders and our business peers go and buy things that don't comply with best practice security. And the problem is people are still making money because if I don't buy it, so the Ministry of Health isn't buying it. Sorry to say this, but if HealthAlliance doesn't buy it, then probably Southern District Health might go and buy it, right? So someone makes some money, they make a living, and then there becomes this implicit trust because Southern bought it and someone else buys it. So I think this is the other thing where we all hold ourselves to account and we honour the standards that we have. For me, if we did that, the tide will rise and we won't have weak members in our sector. And we live in a very connected world, and so this becomes a problem because if one gets, and we've seen this happen again in New Zealand, where one gets breached, it'll become a domino effect. That same vulnerability will exist in other DHBs and primary health organisations. And so we then need to go in a rapid fix mode. So I think there's that. The other point of view I touched on is, look, the hackers out there, the adversaries, if you like, got a lot of money and they're very innovative, right? And they have the luxury of going live with stuff that's broken because they can do that, right? It's an arms race out there. We ought to be helping the latest startups as well. So if we've got innovation in our system, but the person's struggling to fund that innovation and stay alive, but that actually might be the next best thing in an industry to avert an adversary, then we ought to club together and help that person, right? We ought to pick up that startup and we ought to try and promote it because actually we'll all benefit from that. So I think there's another part of me that looks at startups, our graduate community coming through. We all ought to be taking young people into our system because they frankly don't think like us in this audience, right? Because they're not coloured 20 plus years of business, right? And we need that innovation coming through. So yeah, the two things I'd add to the mix is let's not buy things that are not secure and club together, be uniform, stand strong together. And the second thing, and let's promote innovation and new ways of thinking because that will help us protect the next big thing.
Thank you, Matt. Simon.
Yeah, thanks for all that comment, and it actually echoes a lot of the things that we're working on in Victoria as well. I'm going to go firstly onto the buy things that are secure by design. Yeah, that's a very important part of the life cycle of technology where you can actually have a great long-term benefit. So what we've done in Victoria is we've actually commenced a medical device security program. And one of the practice areas of that program is the procurement evaluation phase. And I'm actually working with our group purchasing organisation in Victoria to uplift the cybersecurity requirements for medical technology that is purchased across the health sector in Victoria to lift it up to a level which actually asks the right questions, get the right information when you procure the technology. So even if the device doesn't have all of the capabilities you should like, at least you know it's what you need to look at in terms of compensating controls. So you put that medical device or systems into the most optimal environment when it gets installed in a health service. So I do feel that it's really important to look at your supply chain and see where you can actually have an input, because it actually makes your work much easier on the long term, and reduces that threat landscape as well. In regards to information sharing and intelligence, I'm unfortunately to become these intel guy, and to do a lot of the threat intelligence for the health services through our shared information networks in Victoria with the health services. I echo that Health ISAC is an excellent information sharing organisation to be a member of. I recently joined and pushed that through a department here. It is of considerable value, and actually advocating with my colleagues in other states to also join. And I do feel if we all independently join, we will get to a critical mass, and we'll be able to look towards an APAC type health ISAC, and that would be a great benefit across the entire health sector in this part of the world.
And panel members, great both from my experience that with board level and management, especially around identifying that cybersecurity threats are external, can be what we call the internal threat, and the internal threat is all around education and training our peers to identify that may be happening in their organisations that don't look normal, and reporting those sorts of things. And vendor space, a lot of you have touched on standard operating environments and regulatory and governance, and certainly our vendors in the marketplace certainly big role to play, because ultimately all organisations are taking advice from vendor space based on their product tools. Certainly rely just putting in tools to do our job for us and to protect our organisation. So exactly what Matt was saying, and Simon has touched on as well, is that there needs to be a standard operating environment that organisations need to agree on, that this is a methodology and model that works and allows the community to with any vulnerabilities that may be coming out in those vendor types. Certainly, as we've seen over the past few years, is that they are targeting those vulnerabilities in vendor-based platforms, and those vulnerabilities have always been there. It's just it hasn't been a valuable mechanism for hackers to, I suppose, attack those vulnerabilities. So yeah, it's a complicated and certainly one of the ways that governments are trying to address that by the collaboration is to the can regulate is to bring in changes to legislation that obligate directors and company directors and senior management through to report breaches to a centralised area, so that centralised area and other organisations and other industries can quickly also become aware of issues that are attacking that particular industry space or a vulnerability on a particular vendor platform. And certainly in the past, that has come from the financial sector, were probably the primary target for most hackers, and certainly the financial sector had the ability just to pay people to go away. But unfortunately for the rest of other industries, they weren't aware of these cyber attacks, so they couldn't protect themselves when those hackers decided to steer their attention to other industries like health. So one of the mechanisms is that regulatory compliances are coming in across the world. There are specific regulatory requirements for different countries, and certainly in Australia we have the Privacy Act, and we're now moving into the Critical Infrastructure Act, and which will take into account not only what we regard as critical infrastructure, water, power, but other sectors like health will come under the critical infrastructure regime as well. So it is important that, and again, that is a mechanism to facilitate information across the sector, but mainly to feed it back into a central location so that that information can be disseminated quickly back out into the industry. Thank you. And I'll now move on to the next question. And how can we implement security measures into the everyday operations of healthcare organisations, not just at IT level? And Varun, what are your thoughts on that question?
I think that's a great question, and I think it's an important one. There's a few things that echo true to us at HealthScope here. One is really the concept of security by design. We touched on insecure technologies on the earlier question, and how they're pervasive through the through the operations of the health sector. There needs to be secure design, secure, I guess, implementation of this technology, very importantly. But more importantly, the security measures and controls that we put in place should be as unobtrusive as possible. Effectively, security should be seamless for the healthcare operator to get on with their job. Because as we know, as humans, we will find all kinds of ways and means to circumvent a security control that's too difficult, that gets in the way of a job, right? We see that with complex passwords. So for a long time we've been preaching that password complexity, just keep having longer and longer passwords. But then what you see is, for example, healthcare professionals, or even in other sectors, that those passwords are stored on insecure mediums. We know the famous Mr. Post-it note. So it's really important that we embrace modern access control mechanisms such as biometrics, smart cards, to make that experience as seamless as possible for the professional. Coupled with that, I think it's really important that we target the security awareness to the relevant role and job of the healthcare professional. So, for example, a surgeon, for them, it's important to understand that cyber attacks like ransomware can result in loss of life, and why it's important for them to embrace this security culture as part of their role to actually provide that level of excellent care to their patients. And the other concept I'll touch on is we need to promote secure solutions that offer a business advantage to the operator. Just a trivial example would be a USB drive, right? So USB drives are prone to either infecting an endpoint or a data exploitation vector. But now with the concept of Microsoft's OneDrive and Office 365, you could potentially store that data on a OneDrive account and collaborate, and it's a secure mechanism with the correct controls. So selling not just security to the business and the operator, but selling them an advantage to collaborate and work better with the toolkit and be more productive.
Thank you, Varun. And Simon.
So implementing security measures into health services, that's my day-to-day. So collaboration is the key. You need to demonstrate as a systems manager level, which is where I am, that our work has merit and adds value, and we've been able to achieve a great deal through collaboration with the health services in Victoria, and we also have some very innovative people within the health services who foster that collaboration too. We may not have specific champions and all of that side, but we have a number of people who go out on their own to push the next level in security, and go out and come back to us with some of the good work they've done. In many cases, we can look at that and go, well, this actually could actually well benefit the entire sector, and we'll look at that, and we do. So collaboration's a really good good approach, and we've got that working quite well in Victoria, and it's made everyone across the sector stronger and more resilient as a result. And we're at this point where we now have, there's a great deal of trust amongst those who work in security and other areas through our working groups. It means that we can actually share lessons learned. We can look at when an incident does happen. We can also share and look at the lessons that have been learnt on that. But also we can foster significant improvements by working together in that regard. And we also like to do exercises as well. Incident exercises are a great thing. Looking forward to doing one very soon with health services again, and that you learn a great deal by you play and practice hard. So when the incident does happen, it's you're going through the playbook. You're not, and that it really makes when you have to deal with an incident, the road to restoration recovery much faster, and less likely to have the wide scale impact that it could potentially have had without that collaboration and that exercise as well.
Thank you, Simon. And Matt?
Question 3, because I just had to take a call from my kiddo.
Yeah. Yeah, item 3, implement security measures into the everyday operation of your organisations.
Yeah, so okay, good question. So I think it actually goes back to that designing and security. So look, the way I looked at this question and I thought, I worked in banks before, right? And so banks, they take security quite seriously because, obviously there's money at stake, right? But actually, if you peel it back, what you tend to find, and I think this is a problem that we need to address in the health industry, is that fundamentally people lock up information in drawers. They're very conscious when they send emails. Systems are built so that people can't attack them, right? The challenge we have in the healthcare industry is that the focus is on saving a person, and frankly, security will go out the door if you can save a person, right? So I think how you do it is you kind of tie it back to that, that nub of it, right? So in banking, you would tie it back to hackers will go for the money. The analogy is you need to have a big thick door on that safe because you don't want anyone to be able to bomb it and nick the money inside it, right? So in healthcare, if the golden rule is save the person at all costs, that's what I do, then we need to peel it back and get security into that vector, right? How do we actually pitch security? It's around saving lives, it's around preserving service and stuff like that. And look, if you look at some of the recent examples in New Zealand, you can start to draw parallels now where security is about resilience of service. The resilience of service equals saving lives. So I think that's how we start to pitch it. We start to get it in everyday operations. It's that resiliency thing. It's not that confidentiality thing. It's about how do we actually go about our business and make it happen. The other part of it is like security is an enabler, right, in health, right? So if we look at digital health, we can actually use security to allow us to do different things and to share data, to get patterns of data. So the Ministry of Health collects a lot of data, right? The power of that data is that we can choose to invest where healthcare needs to be invested, right? We can find population data sets that need, that we can basically, early onset of diabetes, for example, we can find out where that population set is, we can target it, we can do it. we can use security, we can use the cloud, we can use all these digital technologies to do that safety and security, preserve anonymity, preserve security and privacy, and we can make these live data sets. And I think that's the power that when you start pitching security like that, and you get some massive organizational and countrywide benefits, then you're gonna have more buy-in.
Still there? I know that he may have to leave early.
No, he's gone. Sorry.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen. All great feedback, and certainly, I think you've all touched on the most important parts. And certainly, from experience, is that managerial level and board level think that cybersecurity fits in with the IT BAU functions, and certainly, while IT people are very skilled at all of their infrastructure and iOS platforms, perimeter-based, edge-based, data-based, application-based protections. Certainly, the skills of cybersecurity really come down to the real skills that are in things like forensic analysis, the responses to being trained in things like incident response management. So how to read the information that the tool sets are giving from that are like SEMS and those sorts of things, analysing them. And it's really about educating specialists in your organisations to read and understand that information. And certainly Simon mentioned education is key. And certainly having things like cyber ranges that are based on AI that can actually mimic your existing environments, so you can actually go in and actually test your own environments based by hacking, not the production's environments, a cyber, your environment living in a cyber range. Certainly that really hones your, not only hones your skills, but quickly identify there are any vulnerabilities in the environment that are on platform or iOS environment problems. So the other thing is methodologies. Methodologies in the organisation, be it NIST methodology, ISO 27000 methodologies. Certainly, hackers don't care about policies and procedures, but certainly you've got to have them in your organisation so you have a benchmark on how you're going to build your environment, how you're going to communicate in your environment, and how you're going to react to an incident when it does occur, and it will occur. So thank you for your time, and we've got. So I'm going to hand out who may have some questions from the audience for the panel. You're on mute. Still on mute, Michelle. All righty. Well, thank you to the panelists for your time. I know you're all very busy, and wonderful information. To take some information, and really, if you have any further questions based on what the panelists have raised, to reach out. I'm sure there is information that you can get them who have direct access to the panelists to raise questions with. Thank you very much.